Showtime, Tuesday, May 12th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Welcome, folks. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You can follow along at Twitter at People's_Pundit. And Tim is back, joined today by Tim the Source Anderson. You guys can follow him at TJ Anderson1. So we're gonna talk about the special election. It's special election day. And we're going to talk, days for California 25 and Wisconsin 7. And there are a couple other races that just aren't getting any attention. We got a ton of economic news. We'll talk about the unmasking of Michael Flynn in the wake of acting DNI Rich Grinnell's decision to declassify all of those documents. So we'll get into it, but we didn't have the market updates. We didn't talk much about the economy yesterday. So let's kick it to Tim. Let's see what's going on out there. I did recap, Tim, the indexes yesterday. You know, so we did talk, about the indexes, what was going on, the NASDAQ being a little difficult, going in the opposite direction as the rest of it, but
and we saw that all day long yesterday, and then most of the market did recover nicely off its early morning lows. And I think the early morning lows were, look, you kind of get up over the weekend and you look at what the market did the prior week, and the NASDAQ was up 6%, the S&P was up 2.5%, and everything was positive. And the Friday action in the market was just so impressive. Advanced declines were 5-1 positive. And then you kind of say to yourself, are we maybe just a little bit ahead of ourselves? Yeah. So then you start the week with some selling. And I think that that's a very typical reaction. I think the market did a tremendous job of recovering from the lows. Now, I was concerned at one point in time last week. We had a couple of those days when the NASDAQ wildly outperformed the S&P and the Dow. So yesterday, the NASDAQ was up maybe 0.75%. The S&P was up a little bit, 0.1%, just barely. The Dow was down maybe 0.4%. So it's not wild outperformance, but it's consistent, and it's making that divergence even a little bit more exaggerated, where the NASDAQ is probably only 4%, less than 5% from its all-time highs. And I think that the fundamental reality is that there are a whole bunch of these big tech stocks that are very involved in internet transmission, internet delivery facilitators. Clearly, the internet's just got a tremendous more traffic than it had before. So many people were working from home, and so many people were either just streaming Netflix all day long, or on Zoom with their coworkers, on Skype with their clients and other people in their office. And that activity is way up. So look, Microsoft and Intel and even Google and a whole bunch of those big mega cap names that facilitate the internet are going to be beneficiaries of this. And even when businesses start to get back, there's still going to be this additional, we were pretty comfortable with a lot of those Zoom calls and a lot of that, and it did work. And it's not like our systems broke down. And I think a lot of people, even if you ask the millennials, they'll say, it was okay, we got by. But if you really got like a couple of drinks in them, they'd say, I am more productive at the office.
Right, of course.
I mean, I can work at home, but I know I'd probably be more productive in the office. Okay, so, but this is just going to accelerate this trend a little bit faster of working at home, telecommuting, telemedicine, whatever you want to call it, using that internet protocol for a lot more communications, more official communications and business meetings and discussions with professionals, medical, healthcare, business related, sales related, or otherwise, than it normally just would have naturally progressed over the next, 3 to 5 years or even longer. It's going to accelerate that a little bit.
So look more like some of those other countries.
Some of these big companies
Sweden.
are gonna be beneficiaries of all of this. In a perfect world, we want to see the economy have a balanced and more of an even recovery. We don't want all of the recovery to be just in 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 tech and internet media related companies and Amazon and all the peripheral offshoots that are very positively affected by this, Zoom. And we want the industrial businesses to come back. We want the airlines to be profitable and functional again. We want the railroads to operate at full capacity. We want it all to come back. And so the concern is that we end up in some type of a bubble environment, like what led to the .com craze in 98, 99, and then the internet bubble in 2000, 2001. There's the NASDAQ's ahead of the other parts of the market. The economy for those businesses are ahead of the economy. They're not actually experiencing recovery. They're just experiencing an explosion of volume. We want the rest of the economy to recover.
That's what consumers are spending on at this point.
Right.
And speaking of which, well, go ahead, finish your thought. I'll bring up the CPI
and just we don't want to see it just be an uneven event where the market is totally reliant on a small group of companies, because it doesn't end well.
Right. And looking at the consumer price index, where are consumers spending their money? So this came out this morning. The consensus range, the low was negative 0.9. The high was for a decline, negative 0.5. Consensus was 8, Tim. It hit the consensus. This is month over month. So, it's a decline of 0.8 of a percentage point. CPI doesn't really move all that much at once. So this is, a steep decline, but an expected one. And then the core was expected to actually post 0 point, so about a half a point gain. And instead it posted a 0.3 of a percentage point gain. And that's because of what if you look inside of the report, that's largely what you're talking about. It's like there's only so much certain sectors can take up, right? I mean, there's only so much that when you look at the overall consumer price index, there's only so much that these industries, these businesses that are taking all the consumer spending, there's only so much they can do to offset the rest. And you can see that in the core.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah.
Look, we had, if you look at just broad retail, grocery store volume was up between 20 and 25%.
Right.
In March. Okay. Now we didn't really start to shut down till late in the second week of March. So that wasn't enough to offset all of the decline in retail spending by any stretch of the imagination. But just to give you an example of the extent of the shutdown and what it's caused on just all of society and consumer behavior, for grocery store sales to be up 20% is just totally unheard of. Well, look, when all the restaurants are shut down, and in late March, a lot of the restaurants hadn't really completely figured out how they were going to do, delivery and pickup orders yet. And everyone is cooking every meal and eating every meal from home. That's going to translate into a tremendous amount of grocery store purchases. Now, some of those consumer staple stocks have cooled off a little bit in the last week and a half. In the last 2 weeks, they have not rallied to the extent that the market has, because they had this big move already, and people went and loaded up on all the stuff they'd have to load up on if they were going to be shut down for 4 to 6 weeks or maybe a little bit more. And now they've probably got enough toilet paper and toothpaste to last them through the summer.
And here, we've talked about this a million times with gasoline. We're looking at what's going on with oil. here's the chart from the BLS. This is what Tim's talking about right here. So energy just declined, though. Food, that jump for food.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness. You just don't see that. But this bar or column, sorry, it's actually a column chart. This column chart actually shows you that, yes, and this is a historically large gain for food. Energy, look at the drop in energy, just not obviously not enough to offset that. Tim, we got a 20.6% decline in the gasoline index for the CPI. That's really what is killing us. I mean, this, it's just tons of inventory.
Now, when was that for April?
This is for April. Yeah.
For April.
Yeah, last month.
So
for the
I
March,
will say that was
0.4
probably
decline.
You're going to
0.4.
have a sharp bounce in that for a couple of reasons. There's a lot. I'm in Michigan right now.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So Michigan is one of the states where obviously there's been a lot of pushback on the governor. That, you know, extending the shutdown and being a little bit more draconian about it than a lot of other states. I flew into Detroit Metro Airport yesterday. I'm actually on the other side of the state, about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours west of Detroit. There were a lot more cars on the road than I would have expected, particularly from leaving Metro Airport in Detroit for the first 45 minutes.
Right.
A lot more cars on the road than I would have expected. And gasoline here is selling for about $1.89, where I'm told for at least a couple of weeks, it was at $1.59, and there was one quick dip down to $1.49. So
and where's it out now by you? Because now we're up to like 190 something.
It's $1.89. $1.89. Yeah. Okay, so we had probably the absolute low price of gasoline and the absolute probably low usage of gasoline right near the end of that last reporting period.
Mm-hmm.
So down 20%. It'll be very interesting to see what number we get for May.
We got a couple historic firsts in this too. I agree.
I'm sure
I'd love to see what we get. It's inside too, you know, not just the top line stuff, but
right.
The index for all items, less food and energy, right, fell 0.4%. That is the largest decline in the history of the series. This series dates back to 57, folks. Remember what we spoke about last week? The charts on PPD will show you that. It goes back to gray areas indicate recession. But also, it says the energy index, of course, not surprising, declined mostly due to the decrease in the gasoline index. So that goes to what you're saying, Tim. But in contrast, food indexes, which rose, of course, in April, we just showed you, for food at home, posted its largely monthly increase since February 1974. So that's how big, when we were showing that column chart before, that's how big of an increase that is for food. It's the largest since that specific subcomponent in 1974. And here, we can show it again, actually. We can bring it up again.
So
there we go.
What exact component was that? Because 74 was a brutal recession.
That was for food. For, And it says for food at home, Tim, and interesting. Just, you know, I guess, like you said, there was a lot of effort to get people to go out and buy at local restaurants to help keep them open. But for the most part, in the beginning of this and through the month of April, people went to their Pathmarks, or if that's still even in business anymore, their ShopRites, their Publix, their whatever else you have around your area of the country.
When this started, a lot of restaurants had never really done takeout, promoted it, or wanted to be involved in it for different reasons. I saw a very interesting interview about 3 weeks ago with a guy who's probably in Pinellas County. I can't remember his name. I can't remember the name of the chain of restaurants. He's a big operator, though. He's got 8 to 10 restaurants in that area. Very popular, local person, well known. I can't remember his name. I can't remember the name of his restaurants. I wish I could. and he does so much volume that he has a fleet of 6 fishing boats that go out into the Gulf and bring back fresh fish for his restaurants. And he said at the beginning of this, he had 10,000 pounds of beef being aged in his freezers, or probably just being refrigerated aged. Because I don't think it would age if it was frozen. But he said, we had never done takeout. I always hated it. I thought it was a terrible part of the business mix. But since this started, out of necessity, we've gone at it as aggressively as we can. And we're running at about 25% total volume of what we were running at when our restaurants used to be full, every night from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. He actually said, he's such a big operator, he had bought 6 vehicles to do delivery because he knew he'd have that enough volume and wanted to avoid all of the big charges from the food delivery companies, which any big restaurant will tell you that, those charges are like, out of range with what they should be. But few restaurants have the scale to provide it themselves.
And where is that? What part of the country?
He's in Pinellas County.
In Pinellas County, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so he's west of Tampa. I'll bet he's got restaurants in Tampa, around the Tampa Bay area. I'm sure he's got them on the Gulf Coast. The
reason I asked that is because look at between the overall, Tim, by region. Yeah. We talk a lot about what areas of this country get hit the hardest when we have these problems. Right. The South and parts of the West can seem to deal with some of this a lot better. And you're talking about a guy in Pinellas, and it's that particular industry.
I can't remember the chain of the restaurants. He was on Tucker's show about 3 weeks ago. Somebody should figure, I'm sure if somebody really wants to bring it up, it was a fascinating interview. He bought 6 vehicles to do his home deliveries with.
Some people see other people's, crisis as
you could tell that this guy, you could tell opportunities. This guy is a born entrepreneur, and he got a little lucky just and you could tell that he was like, okay, how do we survive this? What do we have? What are we going to do for deliveries? What do these deliveries places charge? You know what? That's going to add a lot of cost. And people are going to look twice at that. Maybe we get our own delivery things. He bought 6 vehicles. So, he's got to have he's got to have a lot of stuff going on.
Speaking of Tucker, I don't know. I mean, you've been moving around, so I don't know if you had a chance to watch him last night. I caught some of it last night. People in my family love, 2 of them love Tucker. So he had Aaron Mate on, who used to be from The Nation, and we'll get into that. I mean, let's talk about the Russia stuff and everything, but it was just on fire. Before we move into the special elections and the unmasking stuff with Flynn, I'll circle back to that because that may have been one of Tucker's finest shows, and because he just went after everybody. I mean, it was not just the idea, why on earth did you push this fraud? But then also on Republicans from their point of view, why didn't you had Gowdy on? Why did you?
Yes, I saw the thing. Did you see the thing with Gowdy on?
Why did you let them do it? I mean, Trey Gowdy knew, and we'll have a backstory.
Was that the point where Gowdy said, "You know what? That was a mistake."
Yeah, but he said,
when I saw the transcripts later, I realized that was a mistake. Weeks. But he had gotten some criticism from some people at the time for being, a little bit all talk and
he is, man.
Talking the talk and not walking the walk.
He absolutely is, and his explanation to Tucker, which again I want to get into this, the SBA, the Small Business Optimism Index before we get totally into that, but I'll give you guys a little tidbit. Even his answer to Tucker was like he rewound him back to being a congressman and a politician again because 3 weeks later I figured it out. He's so full of crap. In the end, there were certain people who wanted subpoena power. And then there were certain people who didn't want to wade into that water. And when Paul Ryan, who did not want to wade into the water, looked around for some of his top lieutenants and he asked them for their opinions. Trey Gowdy was one of them. He already knew this thing was a farce and there was something really bad that had happened here. And he told Paul Ryan no. So, but I don't want to kill that story until then, but we reported it back then.
Right.
I mean, so, but it's worth bringing up again because us and other outlet, we were completely drowned out by the Russia crowd. I mean, just constant drumming when all of the fact pattern really was there. Of course, we're finding out more details, but the fact pattern was there the whole time. And if it was Tim, if this was Adam Schiff instead of Trey Gowdy or Eric Swalwell, instead of Trey Gowdy. There's a reason why we call Schiff Adam the bathroom leaker Schiff. I mean, the guy would get up in the middle of hearings, pretend like he has to go to the bathroom, and the content of what they were talking about in a deposition would end up on CNN 45 minutes later. I mean, we knew Adam Schiff was the leaker and the source of some of this as it was going on. But let's
some of it would get on before he got back from the bathroom.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it was like it was almost
45 minutes.
And that's why I started calling him the bathroom leaker on Twitter, just to let him know that we knew that it was him, and anyway, let's get, because I know people want to talk about that's the hot stuff, but I don't want to blow over the Small Business Optimism Index here. This thing was ripping under Donald Trump, historic highs. In the almost 46-year history of the survey, I think 46. This thing was just raging under Donald Trump. Last month, it fell to 96.4, which is a relatively solid reading under most presidents, but under Donald Trump, it was the single biggest point drop in the history of the index. And then this month, and this is for April, the consensus was 84.8. The low end was 79.8. The high end was 96.4. When I saw that high end, I actually thought to myself, that's crazy. I don't think we're going to be anywhere near the 90s. The consensus looked about right to me because of that 8.1 drop from the prior month. But this thing came in at 90.9. But I want to read.
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
How can it be above 75?
I really,
look, these
unbelievable.
Small businesses, they just there were a lot of criticisms of the PPP program. I think a lot of the small businesses, even if it really didn't work out the way ideally they thought it should, they're like, they'd never seen a program like this come in with a positive effect so quickly. You're talking about the government coming in and doing this so quickly. I'm sorry about that and the noise in the background. But anyway, I think that's an astounding number.
Listen to what Bill says from, he's the chief economist at the National Federation of Independent Businesses. So what Tim is talking about there is the PPP loan, and I'll bring Tim back in right now. He's got the thing going off. I just don't want it to interfere. The impact from this pandemic, including government stay-at-home orders and mandated non-essential business closures, has had a devastating impact on the small business economy. However, owners are starting to benefit from the PPP and EIDL small business loan programs as they try to reopen and keep employees on staff. Small business owners need more flexibility, though, in using the PPP loan to support business operations and liability protection so that all these efforts to support small businesses are not ultimately lost in costly litigation. Interesting point. I don't know if Tim's thing is done, going off, but Interesting stuff, Tim. Interesting
Yes.
stuff. Because what he's saying is it would be great if they can use this in and I'm sure what he means is a forgivable manner. For people who don't know, let's remind them 75%, upwards of 75% of the PPP loan used for payroll, that is forgiven. So it's not really a loan anymore. It's more like a grant. What he's saying is it would be great if this was really just a lot of this was given as a grant and that they could be more flexible with it. Because, and if you go through the uncertainty index, they don't know exactly what they should do with this money. And they're trying to protect themselves from it. As we all know, as you all know from watching the show or following me on Twitter, I don't want to give them any more money. I want them to open up. I don't think the government can take, we're beyond the point of tweaking. And I understand what Bill's trying to get to here. But we're beyond the point of trying to tweak a government program to keep small businesses open. The money was to float them. You want to do something great? Forgive it. Forgive it. They forgive stuff all the time in the tune of billions of dollars. Don't carry this over people's heads. Well, can I give this much more for payroll? Can I make sure that I pay this vendor that I didn't pay?
I think if there's a second tranche, one thing that they will. One conversation that's going on is they want a higher percentage of the money to be able to be paid for just very, very basic business sustainability expenses like rent or leases or utilities.
Yeah.
Than having to say 75% of it has to be paid for salaries, wages, and benefits.
And Tim, what about somebody who's like going to pay the liquor vendor before this happened, right? Or whatever, one of his vendors or her vendors, and for liquor that month, and normally they get a Saturday or Sunday comes in because businesses, folks. I mean, a successful restaurant's pulling in. I'm talking about a Main Street successful restaurant is pulling in 5 figures on a Saturday or on a Sunday, right? So they'll take that chunk of money and pay the vendor off for the month. That's how they operate. So to cut them the way that they got cut, I'm sure there were people out there with vendor bills that need to be paid within 30 to 60 days, depending on who, how their vendor works. And to give them the opportunity, and I'm just using the restaurant as an easy to understand example here, but give them the opportunity to use that money to pay for vendors. He's worried about litigation over here, Tim, which is kind of crazy, but not crazy. I mean, it's just the market is a dynamic place. I don't mean it crazy like, woo, crazy. I mean, you cannot, this is why government centered solutions fail. Government planning fails because the market is so dynamic. I don't care how smart you are. You can't plan for everything. You just can't.
Right.
So I don't mean crazy like nuts. I'm saying what a crazy unintended consequence, right? So it's 10:28. Why don't we go through the spiel, give the market update, and we'll get in a special election because this is blowing through, and then we'll have like a freewheeler, and then go from there. So it's almost 10:30 already, folks. We blew through the first segment already on Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barrett. You guys can follow me on Twitter at @peoples_pundit. Joined by Tim the Source Anderson today. Follow him on Twitter at TJAnderson1. And guys, if you're watching on YouTube, what a run yesterday. Nice. Keep it up. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page before you leave. If you're watching on Facebook Live, do not forget to like the page, People's Pundit Daily, before you leave. Or do it now. Do it now before you forget. This way, not only will it increase our numbers, which we want, but also it will notify you before we go on so you guys get that heads up. We've done a lot better with having people like prepare and know, okay, the show comes on at 10 o'clock. But it's inevitable. There's a race to it. I don't want you guys to miss what we're saying in the beginning. I don't want you to miss the intro. Soon, we're going to be having something in the beginning of the show, and I don't want anybody to miss it. All right. Now, of course, the ultimate way to support the show, folks, thanks for the hearts. Keep up those hearts if you're on Periscope. The ultimate way to support the show is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. You can do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com, finding one of the digital subscriptions, or the short link, ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. I'm going to kick it to Tim. He's going to give us an update on the markets. Then we'll lay out what's going on today in special election day world. All right. Tim, what's going on?
So markets have really just been bouncing between very modest gains and losses this morning. Right now, the Dow is up 0.1%, 25 points. It might as well just be unchanged. The S&P 500 is down 0.25 point. The NASDAQ is down maybe less than 0.25 point. The biggest decliner is in the Russell 2000. That has been a volatile index of late. It's been doing some pretty good work at trying to catch up to its big underperformance that it had for most of the last 2 months. It is holding above 1,300 right now, which is a very positive sign. But it is down 0.75%. I would say that there is major resistance in the Russell 2000 between the 1350 and the 1450 level. That's what I would call a closing price gap going back to March 6th to March 10th, when we started to have big breaks on the downside. There's a wide range in the Russell when it closed one day at 1450, right around there, give or take a few points. The next day, it closed much lower. Then the following day, it closed at 1350. So that whole gap between 1350 and 1450 has no price at all in the Russell 2000. That's what we call a price gap. If we're really going to have a recovery down the road, and it's going to take some work for the Russell to get through that level, watch that level on further rally attempts. It's interesting that the Russell is backing off. Wasn't quite to 1350, but it's down 0.75% today. There's one other very interesting item in not really the market day to day right now, but I'm sure you may have seen this, Rich. Trump mentioned this morning there's been a significant issue of the U.S. government military pension fund in having any of their money go toward Chinese companies, particularly with the idea that it would be going toward Chinese state-owned or state-subsidized companies. And Trump mentioned earlier today that he is banning that. Well, specifically I think it's good to understand exactly what they're talking about. There's $550 billion in the military pension fund. It's probably the largest private or public pension fund out there. And they invest in the MSCI indexes, which are international indexes. Okay. Now, about a year and a half ago, the MSCI increased the percentage of Chinese stocks that they were going to allow to be purchased in their international indexes. Okay, the amount of money, the amount of Chinese stocks that MSCI owns in all of their international indexes is maybe 5%, might be 6%, that mid-single digits at best level. So the MSCI is not the only group of indexes or funds where the military pension owns assets. Okay. But so what we're really talking about is if 10% of the money, and I'm just making that number up, I don't know. If anything, it might be a little bit high.
Yeah, it's not.
If 10% of that money is invested in MSCI indexes, of that amount, only 5% is potentially invested in Chinese stocks. But for him to make that statement, I think is a very significant proclamation, because it's going to put pressure on MSCI. And Rubio has been talking about this pretty aggressively since that they should not have allow any of their investments to go toward Chinese companies. Well, they're probably not going to completely cut them out, but I think it's going to hinder them going forward, maybe even make up some exclusions on some Chinese companies, some categorizations of which should not be invested in by MSCI. And I think it's a very significant message. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think too. I saw something earlier this morning. I didn't really fully read it, so I don't want to get into it. But it was like a projected 12 or 13% dip, maybe 15. I don't want to ballpark it,
right.
But I will ballpark it. I don't want to peg it at something specific, but something around there. And it is interesting. And Rubio has been talking about that.
Yes.
This is another one of those issues where this is a real opportunity to make some of those changes. That will never happen if Joe Biden is elected president.
Right.
I mean, well, you know what? And none of these issues will ever really get to the forefront.
I think that most significantly, MSCI over time, had the virus stuff never happened, okay, would have gradually increased the percentage of Chinese stocks
over time
in its global indices. And now that is not going to happen.
It's not,
and I think that part of the pushback has always been, even before the virus, that these companies do not conform to global standards, much less US standards for accounting practices. And it's very hard to tell, what's really there. Now, a great example of a situation like that completely blowing up would be Luckin Coffee, symbol LK, which was being promoted for some period of time. If it's a very well-known name from anyone that's looked at potential Starbucks competitors and or big franchise names in Asia or China, they had accounting irregularities come to light.
Yep.
About 3 weeks ago. I don't think the stock is traded.
Recent. It was recent.
I don't think the stock has traded for 3 weeks.
It basically got put under the fraud microscope, magnifying glass.
And this is not a microscopic tiny company.
No.
This was I don't know how many franchises they have. It's a very, very well-known brand in Asia and particularly in China. I don't know if they have any operations outside of China or not. But believe me, the finance people in China are not happy about it.
Well, let's see. It's 10:37. Let's move on to Mike here, and we got a picture of Mike. I think we did grab one earlier. I'm gonna do a little. I'm just gonna explain because there might be some people who they've heard about this election, Tim, but they don't know that much about it.
Right.
So let's give like a base explanation of it. So. Everyone wants to talk about California 25. This would be if Republicans win this election. And in truth, we're not going to find out tonight. All right. Or at least we'll have a pretty good idea whether he can hold on. But if Republicans win this election tonight, they're going to have an across the board good night. And we will. I'll talk about the other one in Wisconsin, 7. There's some elections going on in Nebraska. So it's not just California 25. But it's a big deal because this is one where you would expect the rest of the elections are going to go pretty well for Republicans. And then, Democrats, they always eat this seat out. All right. And now with ballot harvesting and a couple of things that they have done over the last week or so, which we'll talk about, they have a better shot. Last week, all right, they were telling everybody privately, including somebody we spoke with, that they were going to lose this election. Democrats, I'm talking about. All right. So this election is an election between, just to give everybody a real quick overview. Republican Mike Garcia, he is a veteran turned defense contractor, and a state representative Democrat. Her name is Christy Smith. She's the friend. This seat is to fill the vacancy. I know I'm trying to do this right here. Ex-Representative Katie Hill, who had to resign in disgrace during a scandal over inappropriate sexual relationships with staffers, which are against House rules.
Unauthorized throuples.
And then also to basically, that lying about it really made it worse. So this is Mike Garcia. What a crappy photo. We could have done better. There's Katie Hill's replacement or hand selected because they are friends. All right. And in a very nutshell, folks, this election is always competitive in California 25, or typically very competitive. But what happens is Republicans wind up losing it by like just the skin of their teeth. It's just one of those races. It just is. All right. Now, just to let everybody know, because there's a lot of talk about the early vote. All right. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about the district. It's got LA's outer northern suburbs, all right, there's like a low to middle class Antelope Valley, that the lower reason why that's such a competitive area where you want to run up votes if you're doing well. Lower middle class, they'll vote for Democrats. The middle class will vote for Republicans. And that's around Lancaster. What's that other place? Palmdale, sorry. And then there's the very wealthy suburbs that are around Santa Clarita and Simi Valley. This is wealthy. Upper to the bottom of the class barrel here is middle. I mean, so, middle to upper class. That's a wealthy area. And then there's the suburban part of San Fernando Valley, which is in the northwest area of that county. All right, of the valley. And it's, again, this is to replace Katie Hill. So you would think there would be an aura around this, Tim, where, Democrats, when you lose because of scandal, it tends to hurt you in a competitive area with an electorate. But we're talking about a decade here of defeat for Republican candidates. All right. It's just been one very close loss after another, and it really chaps. It really does. Some Republicans that I know, they want it badly, but they can't hold on to it. Again, last week, Democrats were telling everybody they were going to lose this race. This week, they're feeling a little bit better, and I'll tell you why they're feeling a little bit better, okay? They saw themselves going down in the early vote. They'll win the Republican vote out here, guys, by about, with 55 to 60% of the independent vote. That's how they carry independents. And when I mean independents, and I'll get into demographics with you, they're not really independents, just like statewide in California. They tend to lean left. Republicans outnumbered Democrats in the mail-in vote, which is the early vote. And then Democrats have a great election day and then several days after election day because it's California. It's a complete different phenomena than what you see around the rest of the country, typically where Republicans will dominate on election day or in-person voting. All right. Over this past week, Democrats decided in parts of LA County precincts, the suburbs up there that are very liberal, they decided that they were going to allow them to in-person vote in areas that are only Democratic strongholds. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is true. The actual all vote phenomena actually helped Mike Garcia up until this point. All right. Because Republicans have dominated in the past with the mail-in ballot out there. It's once Democrats get a chance to play around with those after election day votes, which are largely provisionals, Tim. They're not really, look, you legalized cheating. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. In California, it's by like virtue of what the word means, I guess, it's cheating. But when it's legalized by law, you can really no longer call it cheating. That's what happens when you turn your state into an essential third world state. I mean, if this was a new election in an emerging democracy, Tim, they would never let an emerging democracy like Afghanistan, they would never let them do what they do here in the name of voting rights, right? That would be considered by the UN monitors as like dirty, right? So you can't take provisional ballots 4 or 5 days after the election. Let me show you a little bit about what I mean. This is where we're at now. Hat tip, the political tracker on Political Data Inc. All right. We made our own. This one's better. So I took this one. But right now, you have about a 13-point mail-in edge for the Republican, Mike Garcia. Democrats make up about 20% of that. So it's right now the mailed and returned percentage is about 40% Republican, 27% Democrat, and 20% independents. Again, typically the Democrat will win the independent vote 55, 45, 60, 40, even in a good election. Tim, 2018 was about 55, 56, I believe. So it wouldn't strike me if that margin shrunk a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me because Democrats are having a real bad time right now and their vote is not as excited. What they mean when they say, well, it's May, right? What they mean is they're activists that do the harvesting on the ground, that go out and collect these ballots. They're not really active right now. So this is what you're seeing from an organic point of view. This is what the electorate is doing organically. 65 plus makes up 51% of the current return vote. 50 to 64 age makes up 33%. Put those two groups together, that's a solid electorate for Mike Garcia. 35 to 49, the working class, is another 20, and the Democratic heavy demographic at 18 to 34 is 15%. All right. Again, ethnic groups. This is a white plurality district. There's a heavy Asian population, 28% right now of the return. Latino, 17. African American, 20. This right here, I'm going to be a little bold here, and I'm going to say Garcia probably, if we just counted these votes right now, Garcia probably has about an 8-9 point lead. 6 to 9. Let's be conservative at 6. Let's be generous to him and say 9, even though that says 13%, because the Democrat is probably going to be taking about 52, 53% of that independent vote. All right. So you have Garcia with what that will eke out, an edge from Mike, because what's going to happen over time is Democrats are going to be able to do this in-person crap, which, Tim, they've hollered everywhere else in the country about how dangerous it is to vote during the pandemic. Yet they open up these precincts in their areas. First of all, maybe we'll circle back to that. I want to hat tip somebody. Okay, do we have the hat tip? I don't want to put this up unless we hat tip them. If I have to retroactively credit you, I'll credit you. I just want to show everybody what the difference is here when you see a 13% lead for Garcia in the return vote. These are the last few election cycles. In the top two primary, the voting electorate, look at the difference. D1, D7.59, 7.6 roughly. My point is, just take the June 5th, 2018 top two primary, which gave, by the way, Republicans a lot of hope. Garcia took about 24% of the vote. Christy Smith took 32%. Republicans actually edged out Democrats a little bit. 49.6% of the vote in the primary that led up to this election. 49.6%, a Darrell Issa-like margin of victory was for the Republican vote. 49%, so 0.6 of a percentage point, was the total Democrat vote. And that was during the primary. So we're looking at a very close race like this because Democrats will get the chance to do this. But as you can see, you will just not see that kind of lead for Republicans. Week 1 was R12. Week 2 was R9. Week 3 was R2. And now here we are. And when you put it all together for return, he's got like a 13-point edge right now. That's not going to translate until a 13-point voting edge. It's not how this works. He will lose independents. Mike Garcia absolutely will lose them. The question is, by how much is he losing them right now? And then how many ballots are going to come in after the fact? If I was just rating this race based on the fundamentals, right? Putting aside ballot harvesting and how many provisional ballots they will try to drum up. Because you know what happened here, Tim? Trump got really involved. And they want to embarrass Trump any chance they can get. So they were going to let Garcia win this race. And last week, they were basically saying to us, yeah, we're going to lose. It's May, but we're going to win this thing in November. We're going to take this seat back. That was what they were saying last week. Now they're getting like, no, we don't want to lose. So I'm a little bit concerned about what can happen in the next 3 days. And that's why the title of this is Special Election Day, in parentheses, S days,
Right.
because California doesn't have an election day, folks. It has election days. We've essentially allowed this to transform into a third world situation out there. So God knows what they're going to do over the next 3 days. All right. Again, it's like we're talking a decade of Republicans coming so close to flipping this seat and then not being able to do it because outside of LA County, they just keep coming in. And again, it's not those mail-ins. A lot of people say, well, what about the fraud with the mail-in? Here, mail-in is actually pretty heavily Republican. It's the in-person vote and the provisional ballots that skew it. And those provisionals just keep coming in, Tim. It never ends. It never ends until they need it to end. And it's like 90-10. So so let me just wrap that up. I was going to ask Tim for his thought, but just to wrap this up, Tim, if this was
I thought that I had heard that that the in-person voting in one area in particular was approved and recommended by a Republican mayor.
I don't, it's possible in one particular area, but the fact of the matter is the two that are in question that the Republicans were making hay over yesterday, those two in particular, and I think actually this was approved on the 9th. Let me just check my little notes here. I think it was on the 9th that they actually approved it, but they tried to sneak it in like under the radar, no coverage. Right. I want to say it was the 9th that they actually got the ball rolling on this thing. So 8th, it was the 8th. This is where I can even give you guys this area. So there are two that are really damn heavy. And that seems to, I don't know about the one you're specifically talking about, but there are two that are damn heavy. And ironically, not far away are beaches that you can't walk on. But you can go and vote in these precincts because they're Democrat-heavy precincts. If it was just...
I think so.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, look, if they lose, if the Republicans win, the Democrats will say, look, it's a special election in the middle of the coronavirus season. It doesn't really mean anything. And we'll take it back in November. They'll go back to the talking points they had 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think, too, again, like I was saying, if it was just, the fundamentals of the race, I would say that not only this thing isn't like slightly leaning Garcia, it's a Garcia advantage. I'm going to say if you had to twist my arm, I'm going to say it's slightly leaning Garcia because you can't give up you can't turn a blind eye to what Democrats do in the final few days after the election. I know it sounds crazy, but you can't turn a blind eye to it. But the reason why I still think Garcia has a better than not, more likely than not to win is because he was initially thought of as kind of like a mediocre candidate. The best thing he had going for him was that I'm a veteran, that kind of area. There are very pro-military areas in this district. You would think, and he's not like a Travis Allen Republican. He has some, you may not like this, depending on who you are, what you support, but he has some positions that are not the Trump wing of the party. They're more like the, I don't want to say the Ryan wing, but he's not like that. But he has more moderate, tones than he does that he represents the Trump wing of the party. He just doesn't. So he's got establishment positions on some of these issues that don't turn off wealthy people in Santa Clarita, and that's just true. So, which, by the way, is getting more Democrat because, Republicans are just not the party of the wealthy anymore. But it used to be that Republicans did much better in those areas. And I can pull them up and show people where I'm talking about. But the western part of the county, I expect he'll do a lot better in than prior Republicans. I could just see it by who's voting and who's not. What happened too is he started to raise money. Like when he became clear that I'm a better candidate than I look. He's a naval. By the way, somebody asked me what he do. It was like he was a pilot, I think, like a naval aviator, and a graduate of Annapolis. But he raised almost $2.5 million, and a lot of outside money came in, and I mean outside by national Republican money and groups started to come in and said, you know what, we can take this race, and they started to spend. Amazingly, that's not been the case on the Democratic side, which is how this works. The parties, they don't, the DNC doesn't really get involved in House races for Democrats anymore. It is the DCCC. They rely on independent expenditures, which is the nice way of saying that straw man of a super PAC. They rely on dark money, and she just didn't get it. I mean, she came in, she raised a lot. It's just slightly less than Garcia overall, her campaign. But, I think she's 2.3, Tim, he's like 2.45. So very close. But the outside money, the money, the helper money that came in for Garcia, and he's vastly outspent her. Yeah. And when I've seen polling, even though there's not public polling, party polling is pretty clear. He has an edge, and he's not doing that well. I mean, he's not doing that badly among independents as some of the other prior Republicans have done. Like they've lost 55 to 60%, 62, kind of numbers. Between 55 to 58 is like a norm, and he seems to be at like 52. So it would be enough, man, to just eke it out, is what I'm saying, because Republicans are voting a lot more than Democrats. That's number one. And, they're more excited. I mean, it's pretty clear. So if you look at like the city of Palmdale, let's look at them right now. They're, friendly city. 9% has been returned, Tim. That's it. Los Angeles County wide, that precinct, that's going to be a nice area for her, 52. But you generally look around in that map that I pulled up before, and you just see nice pockets for Garcia. And, right now he's at 40. And I know it will also matter how much of that turns out to be that middle-class Republican vote versus that like kind of wealthy in Simi Valley, because there are Republicans that are still registered Republicans. We saw that in 2018. But they're not necessarily reliable Republican votes. They may not be. However, after the Katie Hill thing, man, this woman is like Katie Hill 2.0. You know what I'm saying by that? I'm trying.
She almost looks like her.
She does. It's amazing. I said, did you get her doppelganger to run? I said last week, somebody I was talking to, I said, why did you do that? Why did you get this woman's doppelganger to run? If you have a scandal, the general.
What was the response?
That it was. The truth is.
No, she's a totally different person.
Yes. Well, right. But also too, the truth is it was easy to give her Katie Hill's support. So, they were already familiar with some of these contributors, so, and she's a state legislator. It's a legislator. So I think she's got her relationships, and they felt that she had a base of support, and we'll find out if she does, but Garcia has run one hell of a race. And if it wasn't for all the shenanigans, Tim, this would be Garcia by about 2 points, maybe 2 to 5, actually, if the independents shock us, if independents shock us and just don't go that much for her, then it would be like 2 to 5. Right now, I'm thinking we're looking at a 0.4% margin one way or the other. I mean, it could be that close by the time Democrats are done. If it's not, and this thing's a blowaway, man, this was the point I made. Because last week they were like, but conceding this. And I made the point, right? What if you lose this thing by like 5 or 6 points? Because you just don't seem to care. What if you lose this thing like on accident by 5 to 6 points? Garcia will be the representative for the next 2-3 terms. Because once you get incumbency, it's very hard to take somebody out. He's a likable guy, man. He doesn't scare people. He's not like a
Right.
scary. It's very difficult to paint him as a scary Republican. Like it's just he's well educated. He served in we're not talking about a grenade chuck and Green Beret. We're talking about like an aviator. I mean, he's cool.
Right.
He's cool.
Right.
I mean, there are probably parts of the Republican Party that don't like him more than some of the independents that have to make a critical decision because, and the reason I say that is he will probably be, folks, I don't think he'll be bad as like Adam Kinzinger or something, but he will be a war guy, or at least a foreign policy hawk. I strongly suspect he went from being a vet to being a defense contractor, or serving in the military, an aviator, to being a veteran, to being a defense contractor. So, I mean, it's possible he doesn't, but I mean, he could go ahead and prove me wrong. I don't know, man. What do you think? What's your predictions here? What do you think? What are you feeling?
I don't have a tremendous feel for it. I think that, clearly would be a big moral boost for the Republicans in California. And there are some very staunch Republican areas in California.
There are.
They might not be within 4 miles of the coast, but there are, and it would be a big boost for them psychologically to win that seat.
Yeah, and Tim,
with a quality candidate.
Somebody said, yeah, and he is, and then she's not, is my point. Like,
right.
She really stuck it in her own.
My guess would be that would be the tipping point, is that she's going to suffer from a anti-Katie Hill vote. I mean, look, some people who just don't follow it at all and then go to vote at the last minute might just take a look at her picture and say, oh, how can this woman be running again? I can't vote for her.
I think the Democrats have gone with she's both candidates. I mean, sometimes candidates are just not good to look at, and sometimes they're like tired of looking at the same person over and over again. And she does have this crazy striking resemblance that she really does. I will say that as far as the kind of candidate she's been, she's a pretty good fundraiser, nothing to jump, up and down for. And Garcia outpaced her in a Democrat district. I mean, that's a positive sign. That's a very positive sign. And looking at
the fact that outside money would contribute to that race, rather than saying, I've seen this movie so many times before, why would I contribute money to a race that's probably going to be stolen in the 11th hour through ballot harvesting? The fact that serious outside money came into this race is probably shows that he's going to win this.
And the Republicans outvoted Democrats in March, man. They did. I mean, it wasn't by much, but it was 0.6 of a percentage point. They outvoted Democrats. And the last thing I'd say is, you would think, like, let's say like the area in and around like Simi, right? And then even Santa Clarita, even though that's going to be, they're going to be just those, like, think folks like the yuppie Democrat. All right. There could have been some moderate Republicans, particularly women. There's still Rohrabacher's district, for instance, last time around. He did well with Republican women. He had a pro-military message that definitely, in some of these more conservative areas of California, that definitely goes a long way if you're trying to like take somebody's crossover, base kind of thing. And the other day, just a few days ago, when she needs some of these votes to turn for her, she was like mocking his military experience by the way, to donors. I'm not even kidding. She had to apologize for it. It's like the worst thing she could have done, because those are people that generally are patriotic. They have a very good affinity for the military, for the U.S. military. They're like McCain Republicans, Tim. That's a better way to put it. Right. They're like McCain Republicans. They don't particularly like Donald Trump very much. There's just some of them out there that don't. That is why Dana Rohrabacher lost, because Mike Bloomberg gave people enough money to tell that story. It was a phony story, and we know that now, but that did Dana Rohrabacher in. I pulled that race multiple times. I pulled it up to election day. It looked like he was going to eke it out, but when I removed a certain weight variable, he was down by 2. When I added a certain weight variable, he was up by upwards of 6, depending on what the electorate was going to look like. In the end, though, it was always pretty clear that he was losing about 14% of Republican women. And that's what happened, man. And those were national security moms, Tim. They were like national security moms. And they believed that thing with Rohrabacher. They believed it. And that did him in. With this is like there are similar demographics here like that, where there are national security rich moms, kind of, know, and I don't know how else to phrase them. And Garcia's the perfect candidate for that. And still, Christy Smith could have, and I'm not saying, because it's certainly not over. And, I'm just saying all signs do point to a Garcia edge here, but I'm just saying that she could have avoided some of this, Tim, if she just would not have gotten caught mocking his military.
She didn't need self-inflicted errors late in the game in a race where she's got a real uphill battle to close a big gap in the last 2 weeks. The self-inflicted errors are usually just what stops that momentum cold.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree, because she needs that Mo right now.
Right.
She needs it right now.
She needs it to be following through, for the next few days, as you would say.
Right. I mean, in week 3 is her best win for the next few days.
I mean, come on. They're going to need volunteers to fill out those ballots Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah, that's right. And you cannot put them down, man. You cannot take away their excitement. Week 3 was their best week, even though they were still at a disadvantage. Week 3 was their best week so far. And she did this, and she did it. It's a
self-inflicted error at the worst possible time in a race where you're trying to close the gap.
Right. I don't know. Should we do a quick update before we do Wisconsin 7? And then
I will just say that the markets are like very close to where they were the last time we spoke.
Go ahead. Give us like a minute. Give me 2 seconds.
The Dow's up 0.1%. The S&P is down. S&P is actually flat now. And NASDAQ is actually up 0.25%. I will also add that oil is up about 1% again today. It's up to that $25 level. It's been gradually rising based off a combination of the economy starting to come back to life. I drove to where I am now for about 2.5 hours from Detroit to the western side of the state. There were a lot more cars on the road than I would have suspected.
Right.
And also oil's being helped by the fact that the production cuts from both Saudi Arabia and Russia and Norway and some of the higher cost shale producers and frackers and deep water drillers. Production is down. Demand's going up a little bit. Gasoline's a little bit higher than it was. So that's helping oil get up to that $25 level. We'll just, it's Tuesday. We'll see how we do into Memorial Day in a couple of weeks, which is typically, they call the beginning of the summer driving season. Typically, historically, in a normal year, gas prices would be peaking in the week to 10 days before Memorial Day and the week to 10 days after.
So true. I mean, and we're coming up on it now. Time got away from me, Tim, with the build of the house. Time got away from me. And then I got an email yesterday because it looks like they're going to be done sooner. But even if they're not, it came that quickly. And I was trying to time this for President's Day and Memorial Day, 4th of July,
Right.
something, so we can get those appliance sales. It looks like we're going to fall right smack in the middle of one of them. It sucks. But
So
you know
you're in
what?
that less than 5% of the people in the country that ever have a house built completed sooner than planned.
Yeah, I hope so. And it looks like, my cousin, her home she had done last year. That was supposed to be done in November before Christmas. They were done in August, man, or October. I'm sorry. It was supposed to be done in October. They were done in August. I mean, we're not going to be anywhere near like that,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, they're not as swamped as they were.
yeah, we're just not. We're not. But let me. Let me wrap up California 25. Folks, we'll talk about Fauci tomorrow because he's testifying as we're on air, and I'm like, I'm not going to run it live. We'll wrap into what he had said tomorrow. We'll get into that. So wrap up California 25. I think you cannot overstate the historical.
Rich, talk about this and don't forget the promo, and I'll be back.
Okay. All right. You cannot overstate the historical importance of the Democrats' last minute surge here. But these have been very competitive races. And for Republicans to win this thing, they would have needed somebody it's funny because Mike Garcia was just viewed as kind of a mediocre candidate. He turned into be a solid candidate with a very, his fundraising prowess was also surprisingly strong. Christy Smith turned out to be a surprisingly weak candidate, and that of unforced error, mocking his military experience the other day. She just didn't need that. But it's really coming down to the outside money for me. Mike Garcia got a lot of help, which tells me Republicans always believed this was a winnable race. Christy Smith basically got abandoned. And from conversations with Democrats, they're feeling a little bit better this week because they got those in-person decisions. An in-person vote goes better for them out there than the mail vote does. But in the end, I think that Garcia probably has, like I said, about a 6 to 9 point lead right now. And because of the other dynamics of the race, she may not be able to count on a 55+ % vote share among independents. In the end, though, let's say Mike Garcia takes it, which I think putting aside ballot harvesting, and shenanigans that we all know Democrats do out there. I'm not going to pretend they don't. They steal elections after elections are over. Putting that aside, looking just at the fundamentals of the race, Garcia has an edge. That said, come November, it does look like it will be a hard seat to hold. Republicans have had 10 years of close calls in this district, and they just couldn't do it. This time around, the outside money came to play. And they did, while the other side's outside money didn't. So that generally tells me they didn't view this as a very particularly good race for them, meaning Democrats, this time up. So the next one, and again, guys, I should do the little promo after the market update before I get into Wisconsin 7. If you guys are watching on YouTube, do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Obviously, we are trying to do that. As a matter of fact, we need to boost those subscribers. We're doing a great job, but we do need to boost them. I will absolutely send it out right now per just requested. Don't forget to subscribe. And we're going to do Wisconsin 7 next. The ultimate way to support the show, of course, is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily, which you can do by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. Periscope watchers, diehard Periscope watchers, you are out there. Give us those hearts before you, don't forget to give us those hearts. Do it now. Forget about before you go. And follow the account that you're watching it on. It streams on PPD's and it streams on mine. Follow one, follow both. That'd be great too. All right. And you can follow me on Twitter at peoples_pundit. And you can follow Tim at TJ Anderson1. All right. So let's move on. Give you guys some background. Everyone's focused on CA-25, California 25. And one more thing I would just add, watch where the vote's coming from. We would need to see a little bit more of a lopsided middle class, working class vote for Garcia for it not to be a shocker. Okay. That's the last thing I'll say about that. All right. But Wisconsin 7 has gotten no attention, and there's two reasons. California 25 is competitive. Wisconsin 7 typically is not. This race, Tim, I'm going to say likely near solid, really. But this is a clear Republican advantage. State senator, his name is Tom Tiffany. He is the Republican nominee. He has for a while represented a seat in Rhinelander in the state legislature. And he's been there for like 10 years. It's a rural seat. He's got a base of support. He's well known, I guess is the point. He's got establishment roots, but he has like a clear solidification of the Republican vote. You know, if you remember, and this is where I'm getting at, who won Wisconsin in the primary in 2016? That was Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Donald Trump did not win that, even though he went on to be the first Republican to carry the state of Wisconsin since the 80s. Since, so this is the kind of Republican vote, not anti-Trump, but they're just more conservative.
They were put off by him. They were put off with him a little bit.
And the institutional, I would say, the establishment state party is more like Cruz than it is like Trump. All right. Even though Trump won the state, not because of them, but because of voters that voted for Obama and then voted for him. And those are working class Trumplicans, not really particularly ideological. This seat, he's being challenged by Tricia Zunker. She is like a school board member or something, if I remember, a lawyer. And then some like liberal professor. I think she teaches like some history on Native Americans or something, Tim. I'm not kidding. So that's what he's running. It's just not something that really flies in this district. This is a not pink. It's like a not ruby red district, but it is a red district.
Yep.
This area is, it went big for, it went solidly for Donald Trump. So, I mean, in the end, what I'm saying is Tom Tiffany seems to be a good candidate for this district because he's not going to put off some of those other Ryan-like Republicans, or Cruz-like Republicans, actually, is a better way to say it, because they didn't really, this area of the state would not have like Ryan that much, But, and then also, he's not going to turn off Trumplicans. He's not that kind of Republican. So he's a good fit, is what I'm saying. So this state, this race got almost no attention, but there is one X factor. All right. One, the turnout in Wisconsin last time in some of these areas was not good for Republicans. And we saw the state Supreme Court election was a blowout for Democrats. Trump did get a lot of votes in Wisconsin, even running uncontested, which was pretty incredible. But for the most part, Democrats were buoyed by having the only contested primary at the presidential level, which certainly helped them. And then, of course, older people being more susceptible to the coronavirus, some of the older and more rural areas just did not see the turnout. Here, though, this will be the electorate will be very heavily tilted toward mail-in votes. So there's a potential, that's why I wouldn't say like this is a solid Republican race, because there is a potential, given what we saw before. We're not in November yet, Tim. So they're just not going to be, there are going to be some of those people in districts like this that will absolutely vote come November, but they didn't last time, and so we'll see. There's a potential there. But I don't know. It's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift for her. There has been some public polling in this race. Let me see some of my other notes. But which has been good, by the way, for Zunker, but it wouldn't indicate like a lead, Tim, like an upset. I'm just saying there is a potential here, and I don't want people to leave thinking, well, this is going to be a complete blowout. It could not be. It could be shockingly close. That's where I'm going with this.
Right.
But overall, I'm still saying that this thing is like likely,
a win is still a win.
Leans heavily Republican to likely Republican, because it is still right. I mean, I'm not giving out percentages here like some of other like forecasters. I'm not doing that. I'm saying, where would I categorize this? Leans heavily to likely Republican. Tom Tiffany is a good candidate for this area. It is a Republican area. I'm just saying that there's X factors, which is the mail-in vote. All right. So, guy, what are your thoughts on that? I'm going to grab a quick drink of water.
It would just be astounding to see him lose that race.
Yeah, I'd be pretty shocked.
And look, don't the new Mexico-Canada trade deal that's support that it is replacing NAFTA should also be a plus, because it was very positive for dairy farmers in Wisconsin to be able to sell. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but a lot of some of their milk product in Canada, which they had been restricted from for a long period of time.
Right. All right. And then moving on, I'm going to blast kind of through Nebraska because, we're not really looking at much here. There's Ben Sass, by the way. He's running for another term. There was the guy used to be the head of the Republican Party in Lancaster County. He's a primary challenger to Sass, Marine veteran. You would think, I think he owns a contractor company or something. You would think that he would be a solid kind of candidate to upset an establishment person like Sass, who's not really widely, or beloved. He's not. He's very much an anti-Trump kind of, an anti-establishment, conservative populism kind of message. He just didn't raise any money, Tim. He's not really a credible campaign. It was like,
right.
I don't want to down anybody. I'm just saying you have to raise money to win a statewide senatorial race. There's a Democrat, I don't want to butcher his name, Chris Janicet. He took 20% of the vote, I think, Tim, last time he ran, but it was a wallop, So in the end, he is very left wing, and there's that it's Nebraska, So that's the end of that. I wanted to make note that there was at least an idea that maybe Innes could be and people may recognize that name. Matt Innes has been a figure in Nebraska politics for a while. You don't get to be the Lancaster County chairman of the Republican Party, the county party. He's been around. He just didn't raise any money. Nothing ever happened. There was no groundswell. There was no Trump vote groundswell. It just didn't happen, why I'm a little bit shocked by that, Tim, is I feel like there could have been against Sass. He's not liked by the Trump Republican Party. It's Nebraska.
Right. He has softened his verbal attacks or pushback on the president quite a bit, it seems like, over the last 2 years. He's still not a vocal supporter, but he's not as much of a vocal critic,
right,
as he was during the first 2 years of Trump's presidency. That's just my casual outsider view. I just don't see him I just don't see him anywhere near in the same camp as
you're going where I'm going,
Justin Amash, or some of the other anti-Trump people within the Republican Party. I know he's not a fan, but I think he viewed that, he has
what didn't he do?
Right.
What didn't he do? Right. So if he would have voted like Mitt Romney for impeachment, we would be having a different discussion. But in the end, and do you remember some of those, interviews and comments that he had made? In the beginning, he looked like he was wavering a little bit, Tim, but once he really read into it, it was shocking how many senators did not know anything about the case. They're just freaking lazy, some of them. But in the end, once he did get the facts of the case, Tim, he was, a reliable Republican. No, acquit. So had he done like a Mitt Romney, then, Matt Innes would have been able to seize on that, but he didn't in the end. So that was the smart political move. I remember a little backstory for you guys. When we first made the model in 2014, we first put the model out. A lot of that was focused largely on Senate races. It was a midterm election. When we rated, there was an establishment candidate that Ben Sass beat for that nomination. He was not the establishment candidate. He was the conservative insider, right? Or supposedly the conservative outsider. I'm sorry.
Right.
When we rated that race, leans Ben Sass, right? And then we shifted it actually too. I think it was like likely.
I know the story you're going to tell. Yeah.
We got an email. I'm not going to say his name, but we got an email from somebody who used to work for the majority leader that was like taking my head off and trying to like bully me into, I don't know, change. Like, he didn't say it. He just was like threatening and saying I'm wrong. And I mean, the message was clear. The message was crystal clear. He wanted me to change that rating, and I did.
What happened here?
Sorry about that, folks. Are we there?
Was that me or you? Rich, was that me or you?
That was totally on my end. It just completely dropped off. The broadcast is still there, so it's still going. But it totally dropped me off, and I think I disconnected a bunch of people with it. But I didn't plug in my Ethernet. So sorry, folks.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's coming back. All right. So we're cool. I'm looking at I thought I took half the viewers with me, but once I came back on, it popped off.
I thought it was you, but I haven't.
It was me.
I haven't done the show from this site before, and I was,
well, yeah. So you're thinking it possibly could have been you.
Our technical producer Barry assured me it was going to be a solid stream, solid Wi-Fi. So I took a look. I was just responding to someone, and all of a sudden I heard your voice drop off. I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? Am I going to have to ad lib for the next 33 minutes?
And it's, I'm sorry if that would happen. As soon as it happened, I was like, oh my God, I glitched. So I basically force refreshed the program. And when the browser came back, it popped back on. But yeah, it's funny too, because I was like, I'm so happy Barry was there with you. I'm like, okay, because now you've never done it there before. I'm like, at least I know, there won't be any hiccups. Whoops, hiccup. And it turned out to be on my end. Folks, come Monday. Or actually, no, it won't be Monday. It will be the day after. Monday's the last day that I can't have my producer back. Come Monday, that'll be the end. And then, I don't know, I may give her a little bit of time to rest in between, but just so she doesn't have to jump back on the boat. But I really can't wait to have a regular situation because, it's better for you guys. It's better for us. We could do a lot more. So, that's just, I can't wait. I'm glad that Tim's got Barry there with him. It just makes it a lot easier. All right. So there's some other stuff in Nebraska too, though, Tim. Okay. Let's see. Which one do I want to go to next? There could potentially be a little bit of an upset. So Nebraska 2, it's a little bit, the seat itself is a Republican edge, but basically Kara Eastman was the 2018 nominee. That's a Democratic nominee, and she's going for a second chance at the seat. But she has a serious contender. The lane is not cleared for her yet. Ann Ashford is running, and until she puts her away, there's a third one on the ballot as well, but it's not really worth noticing. Ann Ashford is the threat to Kara Eastman. All right. So until she puts her away, then we'll not be able to say much about it. But in the point of the story is that Don Bacon has two Democrats who are serious challengers. I'd still, though, again, it's still a slightly Republican district. And in 2018, if you didn't get whooped in 2018 that badly, and Republicans only need to swing back a handful of seats. They don't need to swing back a ton of seats.
Yeah, I think, what is it, like 18 now? 18, 19?
Yeah, I mean,
You'd like to see them win more. You'd like to see it be more than a one or two vote majority.
Because
let's swing 30 to 35 seats just so we have a cushion.
Yeah, so because Van Drew swapped parties after impeachment, that reduced the number. It could be like 15 now. I thought it was like 16 when Van Drew. I'll have to go and look just to make sure, because there are open seats.
Freshen that up before the end of the week.
Yeah, because there are open seats. There's 25 25 in California. That's an open seat right now. So it changes. So the numbers actually change. This is when come November, this district will be in play. Like, this will be a district where, especially if it looks like Joe Biden is going to have a good election. I know you don't, we already know how Tim feels on that. But let's say it looks like it's going to be a strong election for Democrats. This will be an area where Democrats will try to target. They tried in 16 and 18. Bacon beat them back, but that was a competitive area. So also too, one is a R+11 district, but again, when you have I'm going to go ahead and say this one's safe, of course now, but when you have a 13 to 8, or 8 to 13 point national mood in favor of one party, it could it could put seats like Nebraska 1 and Nebraska 2 in, very too close for comfort. We can put them in that category, the too close for comfort category, Tim. I guess you wouldn't expect them to lose it, the incumbent party to lose it, but it's possible, kind of thing. Fortenberry, and this is why another reason why Nebraska 1 is just a difficult lift for Democrats. Fortenberry has been in Congress a long time. When he gives meaning to the term incumbent. So when a lawmaker is there, they're building up a base of support. They're making friends. It's not just because it's their home area, home neighborhood. They start to know the businesses in the area. They're bringing home the bacon. They're getting a get out the vote operation. This guy has had like 9 terms to do that. So he would be very difficult to take out. It's not just the voting, the party affiliation, the partisan voting index of the county. Of the congressional district. He's been around a while, and that's why it's difficult to take out politicians who have been in DC a long time on both sides of the aisle. It's just they become entrenched, right? Am I explaining that correctly, Tim? I'm trying to say here.
Yes.
They become difficult to take out, and Fortenberry is like the epitome of incumbency. He's been there for a while. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. But I would say that the second district would fall before Fortenberry's would fall.
A guy like him, it just becomes such a self-fulfilling eventuality that even if there are highly qualified, potentially talented competitors in the other party, they're like, why even bother? Why?
Right.
How am I going to beat this guy?
Yeah, I would say that unless it was an incredible Republican year. There's also Nebraska PSC 2. Right now, Crystal Rhodes is she's going for a second term. She's a very much an establishment progressive, like a left-wing, establishment liberal kind of thing. Yeah. She's been very good with her profile, hasn't made a whole lot of splash. I just think this is an area where Republicans have made, they have threatened to take this. It's just, I don't know. She's done well raising money. The seat itself is, let me just double check. I want to say it's a 5 point. It's a D+5 district, partisan voting index. It's just,
It's got to be Omaha, right?
Yeah, I mean, right outside.
That's
Yeah,
Omaha,
it's got
Omaha
like
suburbs.
2/3 of Eastern Omaha is in this
Right.
district. So it's like the
Right.
only liberal area of the state, and it's like 2/3 of it. So could it be possible? Sure, it could be. I just think that Rhodes is she's fine there. I mean, could something weird happen? Then it would happen before, and it would be one of those things where in November there would be a different result anyway. Kind of what Democrats are hoping for, only in an even more extreme example than California 25, because Democrats do not have that strong of an edge as they do in California 25, as they do in Rhodes' seat. So it would be it would have to be really extreme is where I'm going with this. But everybody knows California 25 is the race today. I'm talking about Nebraska, and people are still asking me about California 25. I thought I made that. I thought I went over that pretty much in detail. Yeah, I mean, that's the race today. If Republicans take that seat, Tim, they're going to have a really good night. I mean, that means a really good night. Just to give you guys some crucial times, the polls close Eastern time, 9 p.m. in Nebraska and Wisconsin. That'll be 9 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be 11 p.m. Eastern time in California. Okay. So of course, it's West Coast. I'm giving you Eastern time because I'm on the East Coast, and I'm giving you the time that I'm going by. Do the math in your head. It means that basically, Californians, yes, they do. They get till 8 o'clock to vote too. Some polls close later than others. California's really, if you're an East Coast person, might surprise you a little bit. It's not really that they vote late at all, relative to other areas of the country. They only go till 8. Some people go a little longer, but sometimes you will see extensions. Tell you what, Tim, I'm kind of wondering if we're going to hear that soon. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to hear that those 2 precincts need extensions. And I'm sure, I mean, it always happens. It almost always happens now when they feel like they need to squeeze out. By they, I mean Democrats. They feel they need to squeeze out a couple thousand more votes. They go to a judge. They say there are too many people in line. We'll never make it by 8 o'clock. And they get an extra time, extra half hour, extra hour, whatever it may be.
You'd love to hear the judge say, just tell them to mail in their ballot.
And
what's the big deal?
Again, when it comes to California 25, and actually, I'll tell you what, talk to some Republicans who think that this may actually help them a little bit. And the reason why is because working people who are younger and at less risk of COVID could be, and I mean working class. I don't mean everyone working. I mean working class could tend to be better for Republicans than other voters who may vote in person, because again, and since people are bringing up California 25 again, I'm going to repeat. I'll try to swing around and answer the question, but I'm going to repeat what I think everyone should know, which is that Republicans will do better in the mail-in vote than they will in that in-person vote, and of course the 3-4 days, right, Tim, of provisionals that Democrats will be filling out and harvesting until Friday. Republicans will do better in those mail-in votes. So that's why Garcia is really going to have to build up a pretty nice lead leaving tonight. He's just going to have to. California takes forever to count their ballots. They are very slow. So we'll know, though, by the time we see what his lead is tonight, but there'll be some by later tonight, by like midnight, we'll start to get a feel for some of it. But in the end, those votes will continue to be counted until the end of the week. So he's going to have to build up a pretty nice size lead. I'll just say this, Tim. Last time, it was the last convention in 16, I believe it was. Very close. It was only like a 7-point edge with mail-in for the Republican candidate. Here, Garcia is like sitting in like 11,000 vote edge, partisan edge. Now, we don't know how those people voted, But I'm just
Right.
simply saying in the past, that's 13 points, man. In the
Yep.
past, 7.6 resulted in a nail biter. I mean, one that was, oh my God, they really could do it this time. And they didn't. So the mail vote, yeah, here it is. And even Tim in the top 2 primary, get this, Tim, in the top 2 primary that was for 2018, the mail-in vote edge was R plus 7 and change, 7.34. Right now, the mail is R plus 13. That ended up being 44% Republican and 36.5% Democrat. So, I'm just saying, this is, if you were gonna, it's tough to look at early voting in any respect, whether it's early in person or mail. It's tough because we don't really know who these people are voting for. But I'm saying, if you were Republican and you wanted to flip this district, man, a 13-point mail voting edge in the electorate is about as good as I think they can
You're
get.
not discouraged. You're not discouraged.
That's right. I wouldn't be discouraged.
You're as hopeful as you could be, given it's California.
That's right. And because it is California, and I would just give people a cautionary tale. Any of you who served in the military during the Iraq War or the War on Terror in Afghanistan, anyone who served in the military and watched us with the UN bring democracy to these countries, then you know what I'm talking about. You get the purple finger. You get to vote once, one day. There is no such thing as ballot harvesting. All of that crap is sidelined when we teach new countries how to hold elections, because it's so fraud-ridden, because there's so much potential to commit electoral fraud. And the stake in the heart of an emerging democracy are questions about the credibility, the election integrity of their process. So if you very early on put the election integrity of a country in doubt and of an emerging democracy in doubt, any kind of self-governments, that is not going to work. People are not going to accept the results of the election. The state will fail, and that will be it. Yet somehow we're supposed to be the beacon of freedom and democracy in the world, Tim, and we vote for 4 freaking days. I mean, it's after election day.
Maybe we should send Jimmy Carter to California to monitor the elections.
Oh my God. I mean, at this point we're laughing. It's a joke, but this is, I don't know what else you would expect. I don't know why they don't use that argument either, Joyce. I don't know. The Republicans have some very talented lawyers on their side when it comes to this stuff. But in the end, they get outflanked every time. Democrats go in there and make the dumbest arguments imaginable, but they pick the right judge to hear it. And then what happens is Republicans never continue that fight. So even when they win these decisions, that's like in Florida, they won and the vote had to stop because Mark Elias wanted us to count ballots that really the signatures didn't match. I mean, it was just crazy. In the end, Republicans, they win the battle for the day, and then they stop. So with Bush v. Gore, after Bush v. Gore, we really could have seen the stake through the heart of a lot of these initiatives had Republicans just opened up their wallet to fund these things like Democrats do. And in the end, they don't. When they have the momentum, they let go of it. They could have killed half of these initiatives.
All it did in Florida was incentivize and motivate the Democrats to be more aggressive, let's say, in their voting methodology.
Right.
And that's what produced the comic book events that went on in Broward County.
And we had...
And a little bit in Palm Beach County.
Otherwise, so
they just got more aggressive.
Yeah,
they got more aggressive. They got more creative. And because they felt they had to try harder.
Yeah, and Tim, we had some what were otherwise what you would think to be credible people making the case. Do you remember? I mean, there were votes because it was closer in the Senate. It would have been very difficult by any kind of crazy vote tally, measure. It would have been very difficult to overtake Ron DeSantis. So we started getting all these crazy provisional ballots where only the Senate race had a vote. Nobody voted for. I mean, and then there were like credible people who were seriously making the case that chunks of like 30,000, 50,000 votes were missing a vote for governor. The reason they did that is because it was easier to overtake the governor's race. So when they start filling in these ballots, they don't want to raise alarms in areas where it's not worth raising an alarm. They don't want to they don't want anybody to shoot up a flare. What the hell is this? How do you overtake a 77,000 vote margin? So they just seem to do it in the areas where they need to do it. And Broward, like you said, a biggie. Without Brenda running that, without her being the supervisor of elections down there, I wonder what we're going to see happen to Broward. Because as you guys know, if you watch the voter analysis episode in Florida, Hillary Clinton managed to squeeze out more votes out of Broward County than Barack Obama. Yet none of that increase in voter turnout and enthusiasm happened anywhere else in the state for her. Very strange. In 2018, there were areas of the state where Ron DeSantis was, performing among certain demographics a lot better than in other areas. And yet somehow there were ridiculous numbers for Andrew Gillum. Broward County alone, Tim, go and compare the vote total in 2016 to 2018. I mean, it's strange credulity, man. They really think you're dumb. And then you have mainstream voices coming up with excuses. Some had, of course, to do with ballot design. I'll grant that. But we're not talking about tens of thousands and tens of thousands of votes, Tim, because of ballot design. That's why the Senate race had a vote, but the governor race didn't, because Brenda didn't do the ballot correctly. Why was it only like that with provisionals? Why was it only like that with certain categories of early vote? Why was Broward County removing previously reported totals? And because Tim knows this, because on 2018, I showed him how it works with the model. You see your election day vote, which is the last thing you're going to get. You get your absentee ballot vote. They come in as categories. That's the first thing you're going to get. And then you'll get early in person, and then you will get election day. I mean, we were seeing these liberal areas report those categories and then pull them back and redo them. And they were coming. We have seen glitches before, but we've never seen that happen in so many areas, Tim. Never. Right. And people who have credible, or at least, mainstream media credible, were coming out with these crazy, ridiculous explanations that I really think did them. That's just a real injustice. Yeah. I mean, you remember Karen Handel's district? Do you remember that?
Yeah. That's a classic example of it.
Unbelievable. And then
one of the worst examples of it.
In Olmsted County in Minnesota. Like, what? Yeah. Like these were reported totals, done, finished, over. Now, why does this matter? What does this have to do with California? Because California is what it will be if some of this stuff is not stopped. I mean, young Kim was, I'm sorry, young Kim, because I speak some Asian, so I flipped it in my head. Chinese mostly, but young Kim won that race, Tim. She was sworn in as a freshman congressman from California, and weeks later lost the election and was pulled back. Until people can show me other historical examples of when that has happened, then I'll take you seriously. Forget about how many races were decided days after election day. I'm talking about, show me an example where a freshman congresswoman or man won by such a margin, the race was called, done, actually was sworn in. I mean, if you have to wait weeks to decide your elections, Tim, or even days, then your election integrity is in doubt. I mean, that's it. Yep. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
I mean, for people who do this, know how these results are reported, there's just no explanation for it. If you need 4 or 5 days to continue to count and change results.
There's no legitimate
There's no legitimate explanation.
There's an explanation for it.
Yeah, right.
Not legitimate.
Right. And if you don't, then just take a look at how this, like I said, look at how this works in emerging democratic countries. Not only is this not allowed, it's not tolerated, it's outlawed, because the last thing you want is for new people who are being introduced to democracy to question the credibility of those results. So, it's just the way it was. All right. It is 11:50. Let's do one market update. I'm going to go get a drink of water. If there are any questions, I'll ask them at that point. But we'll wrap it up after this market update. I'm going to grab a drink of water. Tim, you want to give us one last outgoing thing? What's going on out there?
Sure. Look, crude oil is up 5%. That's probably the headline story of the day. It's trading above $25. Despite the fact that your price of gas might go up a few cents, that's probably a net positive for the whole economic comeback from this shutdown period. And market averages very close to unchanged. The S&P down 0.2%. The Dow dead even. NASDAQ dead even. The Russell 2000 down between 0.6% and 0.7%, holding that 1300 level, which would be a positive after a pretty good move yesterday, last week and yesterday for the Russell. But it's going to take a lot of work to get through that 1350 to 1450 price gap for the Russell. That's another 6 or 8% higher at least.
And just to
I have one other little housekeeping item. I'm going to be I'm flying to Dallas on Friday. I thought that I was going to be knocked out for the entire show because my flight lands about 11:30, but that's 11:30 Central Time. So that's 10:30 Eastern time. So there's a chance, depending on whether I can find like an isolated place or there's a mileage club open at the Dallas airport, that I might be able to jump in, maybe at least audio for the last 45 minutes of the day, particularly if the market's having a move on a Friday where it's worth commenting on. And the other, of course, the other add-on is,
because we got to talk about that. Don't bring up next week. I don't know yet, but I may have to go to New Bern for 2 days next week. So I don't want to bring up next week yet. I don't want to disappoint anybody, because we may have a little surprise for people on Monday, but I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to disappoint anyone. All right.
The other thing that is, they're starting to open up Texas a lot more than some of the other places around the country. It seems to be going well so far.
You're going to
be there for maybe 2 or 3 days. I'm way overdue for a haircut. I might have to look into somewhere in Dallas where I might be able to get a haircut.
Right. I was just going to ask you, are you going to do that?
If you have any ideas.
I do. I would recommend this cute little salon with this woman who deserves everybody's haircutting money. Ours opened this week, and I got to call him to see if he's in. I don't know what my own particular barber decided to do with himself, but they finally started to open them up here. But you should absolutely go to her, and I would take a picture, slap it on. We'll throw it on the show. It'll be great. I was hoping there was more information from Mike Flynn today, folks, just to let you know the unmasking situation. We just have to wait. I will say this, though. Even Fox News is reporting this. Looks like there's some movement with John Durham's probe here, Tim. A bunch of these
Yeah.
people are starting to lawyer up, which is significant. So some of these bad actors who are central to the Durham probe. Where is that thing? Somebody gave me a quote, and it was a perfect quote. Maybe we'll save this for tomorrow's show, but no joke. There's the Durham campaign is going to be, I think, the Durham campaign. Oh my God, the left would have fun with that. Yeah, the Durham investigation looks like they're going to be expanding even further here, and then you have the others lawyering
said
up.
that they were gonna have some reporting on that, but I May.
And yeah,
it's
just
May.
Yeah.
Now people are talking, well, maybe it's gonna be June. We'll see.
And
I get the sneaking suspicion it's not going to be a slow summer news cycle.
Right. I get the sneaking suspicion as well. And I think tomorrow we'll go over some of the results, of course, for the elections that we were just talking about today. We'll tell you what happened or what didn't, or what, in the case of California, how many votes Democrats will have to write in until Friday. I'm sorry. I'm not playing this game anymore, Tim. I'm not playing this game anymore. We all know what the hell they do. And that's it. So we'll talk about the election results tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get more news from Grinnell's move. I really thought by the second hour of today's show, I was going to have something. That's why we even brought up the unmasking today, but it looks like we're not. We'll have to save our little thing about Susan Rice until tomorrow, because I want the proof to what I was going to say before I say it. But Susan Rice will be in the topic tomorrow, or at least I expect it to be. And then we will also talk about the hearing with Fauci, Rand Paul, a lot of them. I know, look, the Fauci hearing was going on during the show, right? So how could we talk about it while it's going on? That's also another reason why I can't wait to have my trusty little producer back, because instead of me doing, I could just be doing this, and then she can handle that, and it would be more interesting. Maybe we could have bobbed in and out, is my point, but we'll bring that up. We'll talk about that. Big news, though, is that Fauci basically said that, you know what, we'll leave it for tomorrow. It's about vaccines. And of course, CNN magically comes out with a poll. Magically, Tim, that says 60-something% of Americans say we need a vaccine before we return to normality. Listen, folks, first of all, Andrew Gillum plus 13. That's all I got to say. Andrew Gillum plus 13. I don't believe CNN's polls anymore. It's not, that I think they're fudging them. I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to say they're poor. They're not good. Neither are Fox News, so I'm equally bashing everybody here. Neither are Fox News' polling. They're not good either. They just need to move into the 21st century. Big organizations have bigger budgets. Live interviewers, particularly to cell phones, which skew heavily Democratic in response bias, they cost the most money. So they have no incentive not to charge them for the responses that those media outlets want anyway. So you know what, Joyce? Maybe I will talk about it tomorrow. She said she wanted me to evaluate it. Maybe I will. I'll bring it up a little bit more tomorrow, because we're going to talk about the issue of that is central in that poll, which is a clear intent to shape the narrative that Americans agree with Dr. Fauci that we cannot return to normal life until there's a vaccine. I will just say, because I was watching some of the highlights from his hearing, he didn't exactly say that it will be a quickly developed vaccine. He didn't exactly say that. And with Rasmussen reports, they ask about flu shots every year. Every year. There's a much higher percent of people who tell pollsters that they're going to get the flu shot, Tim. They'll say 70% will say, yes, I want a flu shot. Yes, I'm going to get a flu shot. And then you look at the CDC number and it's 35%, 40% on a good year. It's just BS. They'll tell a pollster they're going to get it, but they don't. They don't. So, of course, 70% of people think, how many of that 70%, Tim, know that it took 5 years to get a vaccine for Ebola? That there are tons of coronaviruses out there. We don't have a vaccine for a single one of them. Obviously not a lot. So again, that's CNN pushing what CNN wants to push. Them, the New York Times, Dr. Fauci, the New York Times, they all centered their polling and their headlines to surround what they thought Fauci would say. We'll get into this more, though, tomorrow. I really wanted to get into the Flynn stuff, but like I said, I wanted documents to put up, Tim, along with it before we got into it. So, all right, 15 seconds to the end of the hour.
We'll let everybody else butcher the stuff on Flynn and Fauci, and then you can give us a straight.
We'll clear it up tomorrow. Yeah, right. All right, guys. Listen, we will. You know what? Before I go, I keep getting yelled at for this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube and to like the page on Facebook. The ultimate way to support the show, of course, is to subscribe to PPD, which you can do by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. Again, you can follow me, guys, on Twitter at peoples_pundit. And you can follow Tim on at TJAnderson1 on Twitter. Again, folks, thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. We will see you back Wednesday. Oh my God, Monday. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the best, folks. Thanks for watching.